There were some big developments in the world of Spider-Man this week, the release of a brand new 3-minute trailer for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and the news that Marc Webb has officially signed on to direct The Amazing Spider-Man 3. There's a lot to talk about, so enjoy Hero Blend number 6.
I like to think that I know a lot about Spider-Man, but the truth is that I kind of have to hand the Cinema Blend crown over to my favorite movie content director, Sean O'Connell, who's once again my guest this week. How's it going, Sean?
It's going great. You're talking about my favorite superhero of all time, the one that I grew up reading, and the one who I currently love seeing on the big screen. You know I've talked about how much I love Marc Webb, even a little bit more than Sam Raimi.
I think you are the biggest fan of The Amazing Spider-Man, potentially on the planet. I think that is almost fair to say.
That means I'm setting myself up for the biggest letdown, I hope, with Amazing Spider-Man.
No. Well, I mean, let's get to talk about that because, I mean, for starters, this week we got to see a brand new extended trailer for Amazing Spider-Man 2. We got 3 minutes of footage. We got a lot of Electro. We got to see kind of the start of enemies uniting. But first off, what did you just think of that trailer? And are we seeing too much at this point? I mean, what are your general thoughts?
Yeah, for people who paid attention to every bit of footage that we've seen so far, I'm afraid that we're getting dangerously close to the we've seen it all now. And only a few things are left to be filled in, because there's a few questions that I wanted answered, and I started to get them answered in this clip. One of the big ones is if Harry Osborn is going to be our Green Goblin.
Which it appears it will be.
Yeah, and we saw at least 3 or 4 shots of him in this one on the glider and his transformation. Then you have to give me a reason as to why he and Peter have this vendetta against each other, because he's a new character that they're introducing into the fold. We didn't get him set up in the first one.
That's a very good point.
There were just some hints in this initial trailer now that Harry's a bit jealous because Oscorp has been, quote-unquote, paying attention to Peter for all these years. And so it becomes this jealousy factor. And the funny thing, too, is that they're also teasing a jealousy factor with Electro, too, because when Max Dillon, when he's in human form, he's talking about how much he's jealous of the attention that Spider-Man's getting, and, oh, wouldn't it be great to be him? So now he's got 2 different villains coming at him from a different side of they envy the kind of power he has, and that's a unique way into these characters.
Absolutely. And it is interesting that they are going to be, I mean, just from kind of stuff that we've seen, the plot description says that Harry and Peter are going to have a history that kind of goes way back, and that Harry just kind of disappeared for a while. We'll probably see some of them interacting as kids, but you're right, that is a conflict that needs to establish itself. Maybe Harry's father, Norman, might have something to do with turning him against it, as we've heard in these trailers before. And with Electro, there has been images of Max Dillon kind of in a bunker of some sort, taking Spider-Man articles and bringing strings and attaching them all over the place. So he clearly has some kind of obsession with him that I think could play off interesting. Obviously, it's not exactly it's not a direct translation from the comics, but personally, I love that kind of stuff. I don't want to see necessarily a direct translation. I want to see taking these characters, new environment, and seeing what you can do with it.
And I don't know why I have this change of heart all of a sudden, because if you had told me a while ago that they were so going to change the mythology so that Harry and not Norman became the first Goblin, I would have been furious. But for some reason, I'm going into this with way more of an open mind than even I anticipated. And part of it's because I enjoyed what Webb did in the first one, and part of it's because I can kind of see where they're going in this one, and I kind of like it too.
Well, and I think another part of it has to be the fact that in the first Amazing Spider-Man, they were retreading on a lot of the material that Sam Raimi kind of went through in his trilogy and kind of the stuff he went through. And having Norman Osborn just be the Goblin again, I mean, even if you give him a brand new look, which you kind of have to because the first look at the Green Goblin wasn't all that great, but it gives you yet another angle to kind of attack things from in a new way. You're not having Norman Osborn being the Green Goblin again and repeating everything we've seen from Sam Raimi again. Instead, you're kind of getting a new character in there, and you're introducing a potentially a whole new plot line that can be explored to no end.
Well, everything that I'm seeing about the Goblin too, and this goes to the Oscorp transformations, it's all genetic. It's not a man in a suit wearing a mask where he can take the mask off and blend in with society anymore.
That's right.
Dane DeHaan in the makeup, he's a goblin. I mean, his face looks different, his ears look different. He looks like he's transformed in much the same way that Jamie Foxx's character, Electro, is going to be bitten by electrical eels. Rhys Ifans' character, he became a lizard. And so...
Well, it's interesting that it's worth noting that in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics that the Green Goblin was a character who could go in and out of his goblin form, kind of Hulkish a little bit, but I mean, it is a potential angle that they could be going for. Certainly, the Ultimate comics have had a great influence on everything that we've seen in this universe so far, from the backstory to the brand new costume that we're going to see in this sequel. So it may we end up seeing it go that way.
Okay, there's a shot I want to ask you about for your opinion. We haven't talked about this, but they very clearly are tipping their hand to Gwen Stacy dying, but they go so far as to show her getting caught by his web and living. I debated with a friend offline whether is it a deliberate fake out by the studio, or are we going to see a moment
where
he saved him? I mean, I just don't know if did Webb shoot multiple versions and they're showing us the wrong one right now? Do you think she dies? What is that shot?
You're saying that this is what they're showing us in the trailer with her being saved by the web might be footage that's specifically just shown for the trailer, and that Spider-Man might actually save her?
I don't know. I'm not sure, because everything that I feel in my bones says that she dies. But
honestly, I totally get that. I mean, and honestly, that's an important plot factor, and for everything that Spider-Man's going to be going to face, both not only in Amazing Spider-Man 3, but eventually with the Sinister Six and Venom potentially. I mean, there's going to be a lot of stakes that need to be raised, and killing Gwen Stacy is going to be a big part of that. I think that's for sure.
Well, and we know now that the same director is going to be able to complete his vision.
That's true. We have Mark Webb officially announced this week, who's going to be coming back to direct Amazing Spider-Man 3. I'm personally a big fan of it, only because when he first signed on to Amazing Spider-Man, I think the general thought was that Sony was just getting a guy that they could control. Like, with Sam Raimi, they didn't necessarily always get what they wanted, but Mark Webb was this guy coming off of 500 Days of Summer, indie guy, not as big name as Sam Raimi, so they have a bit more control. But the truth of the matter is that Mark Webb has really done his homework. He's done a real interesting job of putting together what is looking like a really cool cinematic universe, and I love that he's getting his chance to kind of fulfill everything he wants to do.
I have two minds of it. I think anytime you can get continuity, it helps. I mean, Christopher Nolan had...
The Avengers what Marvel is doing in the Avengers has certainly proven that.
Absolutely, and they locked up the Russo brothers because they liked what they did with Captain America. But at the same time, I do think it's exciting when a Shane Black takes over for Jon Favreau. You know, you can get some magic. And so...
Absolutely.
But it is difficult, I think, for any filmmaker to step in and play in someone else's sandbox, so to speak. So I'd love to see Webb get his 3 films and bring in a new voice for either a Venom film or a Sinister Six film.
Well, I mean, we already have Drew Goddard is attached to take care of the Sinister Six film, and Alex Kurtzman doing the is taking care of the Venom film. So I mean, they are doing new voices. Maybe they just have to kind of go beyond what they have already. They have Mark Webb doing his trilogy to get the new voice in for when they're expanding the universe.
Well, and selfishly, I want to see Mark Webb do other things. I loved 500 Days of Summer. It was my #1 movie of the year that it came out.
I love 500 Days of Summer too. I'm absolutely right there with you.
And I think that he has some great stories in him to tell outside of this universe. So it'll be a win-win. We want to see him finish his trilogy, but he's going to have the kind of money and financial freedom to branch off and try his own exciting things. And I can't wait to see what happens when we get there.
That's true. I mean, these projects have certainly... I mean, you and I have both had the chance to speak with Mark Webb. The guy speaks about Spider-Man with absolute passion. I think you can agree with that.
Yes.
If he's talking about that much passion for this, who even knows what his real deal passion project is? So I think Mark Webb definitely has an interesting future, and that future certainly includes Amazing Spider-Man 3.
So is there any downside to the Amazing Spider-Man? Is there anything that worries you at all?
Well, I mean, of course, there's always the issue. I'm not one of those people who argues about there being too many villains. I don't think it was too many villains that that ended up harming Spider-Man 3. It was just the fact there's too many storylines. Right. And they're doing their planning. They're doing their homework. I think as long as you can have... And this goes back to what you were saying about needing to have Harry have a vendetta against Peter. They're having to have being justifiable cause. I think they can take all of those storylines and find a interesting way to kind of streamline them and not make everything too busy and all over the place. I think there's a real path for success.
My one question that I want answered by Amazing Spider-Man 2 is, where is Norman at the end of this story?
I think
How powerful is he? Is he sick? Is he dying? Is he restored to power? Norman is the key factor in this story being told, because I think he's going to be a major player moving forward, and I want to know how they handle him, because they've really hid him so far.
And you have Chris Cooper, so you're definitely not going to waste him. So I think there's definitely big potential. Sean, thanks so much for stopping by this week, man.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Eric.
So.